In this episode, we discuss why AI startups, not legacy companies, are poised to lead AI disruption. We explore how AI upends the fundamentals of business operations that established companies will have difficult time adjusting to. We also deep dive into the structural advantages of AI-first companies and what traditional companies can do to keep up. Welcome to the AI Accelerator for Business show, where you get the latest strategies, tactics, and information to get the business benefits from artificial intelligence. My name is Carl Ye, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff Bradshaw. And today we're going to talk about AI disruption in the workplace and in business, because I think I had a very, very specific thought on this. And I think it's very important to businesses to really understand what the AI disruption actually means.
You know, Carl, this really matters because I don't think people realize that AI isn't just a tool, it's a paradigm shift. I mean, startups are redefining business models with AI native operations, while legacy companies run the risk of being left behind. You know, understanding this shift is critical for businesses aiming to remain competitive in an increasingly AI-driven market.
Just to recap kind of where I was thinking, when we go into businesses, when we talk to, I think getting close to 100 here, what our business is really built on is helping businesses either, for the most part, improve their efficiency, productivity, adding AI to their workflows or processes. We're just helping companies, get into the space. When we talk about AI disruption, what we're talking about is a fundamental change or shift in how your business actually operates. And I think most of the legacy current companies are just adding AI into their products, using companies like us to help them build workflows and processes, which is a good start, right? You have to understand the technology because it's moving so fast. But where I believe the real disruption is when and I don't think this will happen very often, is when some of these legacy and current companies completely redefine their operations. So what do I mean by that? Let's take, for example, software as a service. Usually you raise capital from venture capitalists, or you raise venture capital, and then you hire a lot of people. Then you go and raise some more, hire more people. Series seed, Series A, Series B, Series C, and so on. But I think the true disruption is being able to completely leverage all the various elements of AI, building applications, workflows, processes, everything, and revolve their operations around it. So instead of you requiring millions of dollars of VC money, you may only need a quarter that, or even bootstrap it yourself. Instead of hiring 10, 20, 30 people, maybe you only need 5 to 10 because you have all these tools that can do some of these things. And because you're preparing as a company, knowing that AI is the worst it's going to be today, it's going to get better. Everyone's working on agents. You're now setting yourself up to take advantage of it instead of a legacy company, which one has to approve AI use and protect its market share. And it's too risky for them to actually completely overhaul their operations, potentially letting a lot of people go because they don't know that may hurt their profit margin.
Well, you know what, Carl, and again, I think this is an important topic because I think that if we take a look back and, not so long ago, 20 plus years ago, when the internet came out and became a thing, there were a lot of businesses that either failed or were unable to adapt. You take a look at the Blockbusters, malls used to be filled with travel agencies, the Yellow Pages, media companies, bookstores. I mean, the list goes on. And I think that, and again, we've talked about this in other podcasts, is that, I used to work in the media business. I worked for CTV, and a lot of those traditional media companies looked at the internet and tried to shove this new model into their old way of thinking. And I think that's a big mistake. And you see companies like Google, Airbnb, Skip the Dishes, Salesforce, all came from taking the technology and looking at it for what it was and building companies on it. So I think it's important because I think there will be AI startups that will totally change the way certain industries are dealt with. But I also think there's a huge opportunity for these legacy companies if they can get their heads around not thinking old school and going, how can we take our years of knowledge and expertise and understand this new technology, and let's allow ourselves to be the new startup. It doesn't have to be a bunch of kids in a garage using the technology because they're the ones that understand it. I think there's a huge opportunity for traditional companies to get on this and be what I would say would be the startup, but from, some of these legacy companies.
There's I can't remember who sent this. I was reading about, or someone suggested, hey, why don't companies create a parallel version of themselves, essentially designed to disrupt themselves? So they kind of create the hive off like a kind of a AI company that is designed to do that. A very interesting concept. I just, knowing, coming from bigger organizations, also going to medium-sized businesses, there's a lot of risk to even do that or even just completely overhaul. So an example of overhauling, when we talk about that is, let's say you have certain processes that you do. There's certain people that, simple example, there's people who you rely on to do certain processes, right? Government's probably the easiest example, but for some companies, let's take the administrator. The administrator has to do a lot of repetitive tasks, emails, write notes, all those different things. Do companies have the courage or understanding of AI to say, you know what, we're going to completely redefine our entire admin process where everything is going to be, or at least for our case, 10 to 40%, or even 60%, those things that the administrator is doing is now going to be completely automated, and we're going to actually make employees part of that automation rather than rely on the administrator to do something, right? So they're the ones who have to trigger the automation, kickstart it, whatever it is. That is a complete redefining of a very simple process. But I'm not sure if a company will want to do that.
Well, you know what though? I think risk is an interesting term, because is it risky to, look at AI and start to figure out how to, integrate it into your business? And is there risks with data security? Like, there's all kinds of risks. But I would also say there's also a lot of risk of having your business being left behind or completely put out of business, because I'm sure that the Blockbuster people, were pretty risk adverse and skeptical of this new technology. And yet Netflix comes along with a new way of thinking and takes them out. I think it's the same thing in the taxi business with Uber. I mean, there's all these correlations, but I think now with AI, I think it's going to affect even a broader reach. I think, lawyers, accountants, energy companies, construction companies, retail, manufacturing. I think there's an opportunity here to, and I guess that's the thing is how much of a risk is it to be able to set aside, a bit of, a few resources to explore this new way of thinking and approach to your business that's not going to go away. I mean, I think that's the thing that business executives need to realize. This isn't a passing fad. You need to take it serious.
I think it's very difficult though. Like, so if you are looking at it from a business, and in previous episodes, even the episode we did with the 12 days of shipments, right? There is no way, I would imagine, outside the AI bubble, very, very few business leaders actually understood what was being shipped those 12 days, right? Especially the big ones like advanced voice, real time, with Google multimodal, O1, O3 reasoning. So you have AI progressing so fast. Pretty much a new analogy for me is like when we talk about iPhone 1, iPhone 16 was released the year after. But imagine having each iPhone iteration being released every 2 to 4 weeks. iPhone 1, iPhone 2, iPhone 3, 3G, right? 4, 4G, whatever it was. Every 2 weeks. Just no one can keep up with that. And you just kind of start tuning this stuff out. In fact, there was an interesting chart where when O3 was released Friday, most mainstream medias that we saw didn't even cover it. Even like social, a lot of the social didn't cover it outside the AI bubble and tech journalists and tech news. If you have a business leader who can't keep up with that, who's focused and rightfully so, focused on their business, wanting it to grow, taking care of their employees and so on, how can a business completely take advantage of it? Obviously hiring guys like us, right? But we're not available to everyone in the world. How can anybody even be remotely understanding and then understand it enough to then take a risk on that?
Well, but I mean, Carl, how many executives have we reached out to that have said thanks, but no thanks? Mm-hmm. And it blows our mind. Like, we're like, hey, that's totally fine. But I think that whether companies are talking to guys like us or whether they're doing it themselves internally, the message that we always preach to everybody is at least educate yourself on this and start to take a look at some of the possibilities and how it's going to impact your operations, how it can create more efficiency, how it can improve your profitability. And that doesn't, education doesn't have to be a huge investment. I think it's those small steps. And again, we realize too, like we take a look at these models and trust me, my head goes to, how does this, what's my return on investment? If I'm a business executive, how could I get this into my business without spending gobs of money? And again, being a little too far ahead of the curve, because we've seen that too, where people jump on these things, they invest time and money into something that's either doesn't work out or is replaced by a better solution a couple of months later. So I think it's those baby steps, right? It's that you got to get into the game, get educated, start to think about how it can apply to your industry, and just, invest a bit of time and energy off the top, but then kind of go with the flow.
Some of the tools that we're playing with or looking at, right? So things like Replit Agent or Bolt or Lovable, where you can just use natural language to build applications. And there's so easy ways to, hey, you know what? There's a problem in our company. Let's see if we can build our own application. It may not be completely working and we have to buy a SaaS tool, but like, hey, let's see what it looks like. Maybe kind of map it out, see initial use cases, usability, and then take it to a developer. Probably saved you, however many thousands of dollars, because you've started the concept. I think the big piece too is, over a decade ago, we were starting to see the rise of what we call vertical software as a service. So I heard about this through, I think, the Big Technology podcast, and you'll appreciate this too. So when you initially bought software, I remember, because the only thing I remember buying software is my dad buying me the video game TIE Fighter. And I think he bought it through a disc, those small discs. Remember that? And if you bought something, that's what you get. There's no, if you want to buy an upgrade, you have to buy it again and install and so on. Then came the rise of software as a service, right? So you have to buy the software and you have to pay a monthly fee, but you get all the upgrades and you get the service and you just license the software. Then what's interesting is then you get outcome-based pricing, where it's however many times you use the software is how much you pay. What's really fascinating now is if people can clone any type of software, because like Bolt, Lovable, you could just take a picture of whatever tool now and just ask it, hey, can you build something that looks like this? And it builds it, which is kind of neat. The outcome now is the price you're paying is for the actual outcome. So, hey, did this thing that you built me, that anyone can build, did it actually help me meet my business goals? Because if it didn't, let's say you start, how many leads did I get? How many closed leads? How many, closed wins? Whatever the software outcome benefit is supposed to happen, you're actually paying that now. And I actually thought that was a really neat thing. But long story short, going all the way to AI agents, I think where the disruption, in addition to the companies, the new startups, is where we're moving into is the agent, which can do stuff for you. So I remember we had this presentation, Jeff, one prospect, and the most common thing that most people think about when they think about agents is, hey, book me travel and book me a restaurant, right? Everybody loves that. But I don't think that's a really great, and I want you to keep using that, prospects. But think about all the things that, from a personal standpoint, what type of flight do you want? What kind of seats do you want? The time of day you want the flight. Do you want any connections? Do you want no connections? There's too many little pieces in there that I'm not sure an agent can really be aware of unless it knows you inside out. I think the concept, and I love this from Sam Altman. I'm going to show this video right now.
Maybe I can give the following example. When people talk about an AI agent acting on their behalf, the main example they seem to give, fairly consistent, is, you can ask the agent to go book you a restaurant reservation, and either it can use OpenTable or it can call the restaurant. Okay, sure, that's like a mildly annoying thing to have to do, and that maybe saves you some work. One of the things that I think is interesting is a world where you can just do things that you wouldn't or couldn't do as a human. So what if instead of calling one restaurant to make a reservation, my agent would call me like 300 and figure out which one had the best food for me or some special thing available or whatever. And then you would say, well, that's like really annoying if your agent is calling 300 restaurants. But if it's an agent answering each of those 300 places, then no problem. And it can be this like massive parallel thing that a human can't do. So that's like a trivial example, but there are these like limitations to human bandwidth that maybe these agents won't have. The category I think that was more interesting is not the one that people normally talk about, right? You have this thing called restaurants for you. But something that's more like a really smart senior coworker, where you can like collaborate on a project with, and the agent can go do like a 2-day task or 2-week task really well, and paying you back when they ask questions, but come back to you with like a great work product.
As you saw from the video, the concept is, can you take it's a senior coworker that can go off and do something that would have taken months in a couple hours or maybe a day or two, and come back with something, is it fully done? Maybe not. 60-70% done, and then times that by 10. That's ridiculous.
Well, and I think that's that new way of thinking. And it's funny you say that, because I totally agree with you. I understand there's so much more capabilities for agents, but I think it's also bringing it back down to that simplest level of people look at this new technology and they go, I don't even know what I don't know. I don't even understand what it can be done. So how do you bring it down into the simplest forms? But you're right. I mean, replicating a senior level employee to be able to, whether it's write a report or organize an event or coordinate, a new product release, whatever it might be, I think that's you're right. That's where you're going to see those massive efficiencies for companies to be able to take advantage of it. I think the other thing too is that there's so many new releases like we had in our other podcasts over the past month that I think that you kind of get fascinated by the latest and greatest, and yet the majority, I would say, I don't know what the number is, but probably 98% of organizations out there aren't even using the technology for the simplest of tasks. Mm-hmm. And I think if we can get people using it for the simplest of tasks, then they can start to get down that road where they're going, wow, can it do this? Can it do this? And they start to kind of move down that line. So again, I think it's that open thinking, and it's the Lumiere law that you always talk about, and I think it's getting people kind of thinking in a different way.
It's always for us, it's always we see companies that are like, who know nothing. And I think I equate this to when I was traveling in Peru. I think the people in Peru all had cell phones. And this was back in 2010, 12, something like that, where they completely bypassed the landline just because they couldn't afford it. Like, they couldn't afford the infrastructure required to build it. So they got the cell phone. I think what's really awesome about certain companies, medium-sized, non-tech, traditional, can they leapfrog using AI? Even the medium-sized or smaller business, can they now punch above their weight because they have this tool, PhD level reasoning, the best coder, the best mathematician, or very few companies can hire these people, but now you have it right in your pocket. Times it by 10 because a whole bunch of employees. Can you do it? But to get to that level of thinking, I think you have to start with, oh, these are the things that it can do today. Yep. These are just having that regular interaction, and maybe not having the silo of people in your organizations. Oh, this person uses AI, this person does this. But we as a business don't have a unified approach to it to actually meet our goals. We just have a bunch of people using it to help them do their jobs. That's very different than our entire company is unified in using it and leveraging it, and then eventually changing our operations completely to revolve around it.
Well, and I think if we come back to this, like, again, you think about the legacy companies, and so we're talking big, organized, established companies, and they could even be 20-year-old companies. Like, you take a look at Google, and Google is having to shift and start thinking in a different way when you got the OpenAIs and the Perplexities coming up. But you think about that startup advantage, and I think that's the other exciting thing. And I like that idea, what you said earlier about legacy companies taking a look at, create your own startup. get a small group and say, use the latest technology to maybe challenge our existing business model. Because when you go to that startup advantage, and you've talked about this, right? It's small teams with massive amounts of knowledge available. They don't have any big corporate, governance holding them back. They're kind of free to do what they want. And I think that's the exciting thing about, I think, what we're going to see over the coming, years is those startups. Like, where's the next Uber, the next Airbnb, the next Netflix coming from using AI technology?
Yeah, and I don't think it will be Salesforce, HubSpot. Like, I don't think it'll come from that. I think this is the whole point of our show today is like, you got to think about those startups. I think for any businesses that are watching, you've got to be aware those startups and smaller companies have that ability to completely disrupt your industry. And it's not an if, it's a when. So can you be that startup? I feel 99% of companies won't be because they have to protect their margins. Like, just like Google, I don't know how much of their percentage of revenue is taken from paid search, but we're seeing it disrupted right before our eyes. Perplexity, ChatGPT search. It's not even barely disrupted, but we're seeing more and more people. It's like, well, I want the answer. I don't want ads, answer. Like, and you start not trusting a lot of that stuff. So how does a company like Google, which rakes in billions upon billions of dollars, and this could be any industry, if they're making millions upon millions of dollars, what incentive do they have to make that change? And I think this is where the courage of leadership, taking that risk and being forward thinking, that we don't see very often.
But I think the funny thing too is that you're mentioning a Salesforce and a HubSpot. Well, those companies didn't even exist 40 years ago. They're really the newcomers, but they're going to be the same companies as the McLean Hunters or the CanWest Globals, the old media companies that were kind of sitting back, relying on their old systems, and all of a sudden they get taken out by a Meta and a Google. And, and I think the Metas and the Googles now are those ones that there's an opportunity to disrupt them. And I think it's in every industry. I mean, if you think about, even the retail space. So you think about a clothing store. So now you go in and they've got 5 colors of a shirt you want to buy. Well, imagine using AI technology so that you could actually select out any color you want and have it delivered to your house the next day, because you've got AI being able to be more efficient so that you've got more flexibility in the color of shirt or sweater that you want to buy. Again, and I think that's the interesting thing about it is that even what we're doing right now, you and I are recording a podcast. You're at your house, I'm at my house. 20 years ago, somebody had said, oh, that'd be cool, but I'm not really sure how to do it. Well, here we are doing it now. And I think that's the exciting thing about AI is where can these startups or legacy companies use the startup mindset, like I say, capitalize and really disrupt.
So for our audience, a couple of questions for you is, one, can you think of potential startups or companies today, or even processes that may disrupt your industry or even your company in the next, I would say 5 years, but forget 5 years, in the next 3 years? And the second part is, what would you do today to either combat that or be part of that disruption? Learn more about implementing AI in your business by watching these videos here. Enjoy today's episode and want to learn how you can implement AI in your company? Then please subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next episode.